Transition partners take mental health very seriously. We are now supporting Claro Mental Health Charity, who are local and based in Harrogate. We are working closely with Richard Kenny, who is the IT director at TechBuyer. Claro operates as a commercial workshop making goods for businesses, which enable those with long-term mental health conditions to function in a voluntary real work environment. We would love it if you can join us in supporting this amazing cause and charity and donate what you can. Any amount would be greatly appreciated. Thank you very much, and thanks to all our listeners.
Hi, this is the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. My name's Elly Greening.
And my name's Sandra Stewart.
On this podcast, we will be interviewing some of the UK's greatest tech leaders. We'll be discussing war stories, battle scars, and their learnings from their journeys.
Hopefully, you will pick up some great tips, learn from others' experiences, and have a good laugh along the way.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Let's Talk Leadership podcast. So after a couple of weeks worth of holiday from myself and Sandra, we're back recording a session today with the fantastic Jen Mossop Scott, who's the Director of Business Systems at TalkTalk. We're extremely excited to have Jen on the podcast today, as we've heard so many amazing things about her from our good friend Mick Holden and Ian Holloway. Jen's got an impressive background right the way through from studying neuroscience at Oxford to joining the tech community at Accenture, working with top brands like Morrisons and N Brown Group. Hello, Jen.
Hi,
Jen.
Awesome to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hi.
Hi, Jen. Fantastic to finally have you on the show. I think was it October when we met you, and I think when I first kind of around that time when I approached you. I know you've had a very busy year, and obviously we've had a number of other things to contend with during that time, so it's great to have you on the show. I'm so, particularly now that I've had a real good look at your background, so interested in finding out more about you. I was so interested when I saw that you'd studied at Oxford University, neuroscience, so intrigued to hear more about that as well. So I'd like to just start off with hearing more about you. If you could tell us a bit more about your journey, your background, how you got to where you are today, that would be fantastic.
Of course. Hi, Sandra. Right. Okay. Where to start? Well, first off, I guess to just let the listening community know that, I have basically not prepared pre-canned answers to any of these questions. So what you're getting today is very much off the top of my fresh head. So it will be, I guarantee, sort of authentic and in the moment. So my own sort of personal and career history has I guess just brought me great pleasure and joy over the years and years that I've been both, I suppose, a scientist in the olden days and a professional sort of, I guess, IT and change and transforming type director more recently. I grew up, you can probably tell from my accent that I am not native to Manchester, which is where I call home now. I'm Canadian and spent my formative years in really glorious Western Canada. I grew up in Edmonton, family in Calgary a little bit. And I had a pretty cool childhood, very normal, very balanced, where, sort of daughter of an sort of musician and a scientist / musician. Wow. I kind of grew up with a really wide range of interests, right? So I was quite a, I guess, diligent, competitive, maybe cheerful, sort of optimistic kid. I strived at school, always interested in learning. And I think probably that following your curiosity has maybe been a theme that leads to a bit of a meandering path through life, but boy, have I learned a lot along the way. So, so my first sort of academic foray was in a, beyond high school, was an amazing year-long program where I opted to study intensively the history of Western civilization through the great books of our time. So not, again, what you'd expect for someone necessarily with a kind of career now in IT, but sort of reflective of really wanting to know a lot about the world. And from there, I kind of discovered neuroscience as a particularly interesting course of study, again, not related to the history of Western philosophy, but kind of a new-ish field that was expanding rapidly. This is in the kind of early 90s from its real foundational creation in the distinction as a science more in the 70s. So neuroscience is all over the place in the press and in the popular popular media these days, but wind back 25 years, etc. It was and it still is. It was a pretty exciting place to be, and like often happens, I think, with life and with relationships and inspiration, you find someone in a little niche that believes in you and kind of inspires you and pulls you along. I had a professor like that in my undergraduate who just said, you're really good at this and I believe in you and here's some opportunities. And one thing led to another. And I found myself in Oxford studying for a PhD where, more of the same kind of happened. And I guess the independent thought and the discipline that you have to put into sort of postgraduate research and the creation of something that is entirely new and entirely your own is a pretty daunting task. But the sort of almost transferable skills that you get from doing that deep academic research really speaks to kind of discipline and independent thought and kind of analytical acumen. But you'd also be surprised that you think of a sort of neuroscientist in a lab or a biochemist in a lab or something being a bit kind of nerdy and antisocial. It's not. It's actually just as important to form relationships with sort of other scientists and collaborators and to be able to develop the skills of storytelling and communicating, whether that's the results of some discoveries that you've made, or just being able to kind of influence and teach those around you. So I am no longer a neuroscientist, and really sort of stopped that after my PhD was finished. But many of those experiences and skills, and of course the joy of studying alongside some immensely amazing and clever people, and in a beautiful city, still look back with very rosy. Was
that the reason you moved to the UK then?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I was born in London and lived there for the first month of my life. But so I've actually had two passports for a while. But yeah, that was the reason I moved to the UK, was because I had funding at a glorious university to go study. And then, of course, life takes its meandering turns. I fell in love. I met my amazing husband. Didn't intend actually to stay in the UK, but of course, when life happens, you go with it. And so my husband had a similar academic position in Manchester, and I was like, well, I'll go with. We got married and came north to Manchester, and I think, having reflected on the reality of an academic career in the north of England versus some of the stuff that I really loved about my time studying, which was interacting with people, solving complicated problems. You can find that in a lot of walks of life. So I took a job at Accenture on their graduate program based out of the Manchester office. And again, just by, I think, happy coincidence, following my nose and being, curious and full of enthusiasm for whatever I could learn next. I found myself in Accenture's, I think, really talented and quite sort of formative and sort of almost incubator for their retail practice, which was based out of the Manchester office. And simply because I was here and, my husband was here, I'm like, well, I will do that for a bit. And so I spent 9 years and a couple of maternity leaves included in consulting. And, that's intense and an amazing learning ground. But yeah, I got to work. And of course, when you're in those sort of, up and coming consulting roles, you get thrown into the deep end, and you have to learn fast, and you have to be credible, and you have to be a great communicator, and you have to sort of build and work with great teams, and you have to really understand multiple aspects of various different businesses. So it's a terrific place to learn and grow as a professional. And I had 9 very enjoyable years at Accenture. Lots of intense craziness and lots of things that didn't go well as well, of course, but with some tremendous colleagues and people who really are the kind of, powerhouses of the retail sector in this country to this day. So I love my time there, but of course it's kind of hard when you're a mom, right? Right.
Let alone working in a consultancy and being a mum as well. I was just sat there thinking, 9 years, 2 maternity leaves, consultancy. Wow.
Yeah. Well, I think that's maybe one of my most kind of core things that I just have to do and be myself is a mom, and with my kids, and not really that willing to remain on the road or away from home, or actually doing uninteresting work in order to be close to home. So I think it was 2008 when I was just about to return from my second maternity leave that there was a Lehman Brothers type financial crash and a voluntary redundancy round. So I put my hand up, and that was, I think, one of a real kind of almost serendipitous moment, because it allowed me to reflect on the fact that I do not outsource my kids. I want, in order for me to be a sort of fulfilled human, I need to have a really interesting professional life, but I need to see my kids of anything. Does that make sense? I'm sure that's resonated tons of your listeners, but I went to work at Morrisons, in Bradford. Again, really interesting business. And at the time going through a, quite a big, root and branch overhaul of business model, processes, technology. And I did 3 or 4, probably 3 core roles there, and learned at Morrisons, obviously a ton of content and many role models of great leadership, honestly, great. But also learned how important it is to believe in the purpose of an organization. Because unlike consultancy, when you're in-house, you are serving just that one strategic goal. That is, the sort of Morrisons aims, or laterally the N Brown aims, or the TalkTalk aims, and that fits with me, right? I'm kind of all about a purpose, and I think you can really drive what a business is about from within. As much as you like to think as a consultant that you are absolutely doing the very best things for the client at all times, you are still in this sort of bimodal dichotomy of having 2 masters, as it were. And it really suits me to be driving things from within a business. So I was at Morrisons for about 4.5 years. Again, lots of triumphs, lots of challenges. Maybe we can go into some of those in due course, but that's a long commute from South Manchester to Bradford every day. Yeah. So when an opportunity came up at N Brown on a similar kind of transformational program incubation, it felt like it was time. So I was quite grateful to say farewell to the M62 overpass towards Bradford, and actually really keen, again, following that kind of curiosity and learning thing, to get to grips with more of the sort of digital customer experience. So N Brown, for those of your listeners who aren't aware of that, that group is the sort of group entity behind many fashion brands, typically sort of fit specialists like Simply Be, Jacquemo, JD Williams. Another amazing business, which in terms of digital transformation has an incredible story to tell, from its catalog-based heritage in the, I think like from the late 1800s, so this is a very venerable and established distance selling organization, but basically recognizing, of course, that a catalog channel is a melting iceberg, so to speak. And over the few years that I was there, the facing into a sort of truly digital customer experience was well underway and fascinating, again, to learn new skills. And a year and a half ago, I felt like I was perhaps done with learning grocery and retail, ABC, having worked at Tesco and WH Smith and Shell Retail and various other things in my consulting career and Brown. I'm learning something new, which is awesome. So I now work at a telco. I'm the technology director for delivery at TalkTalk, and that's an amazing sort of now northern-based business, a real sort of entrepreneurial and exciting place to work. And I love it, again, with that kind of in-house mantra, because it is crystal clear about its strategy and its values. Fantastic and diverse leadership team, sort of a really wonderful place to work with great culture. And I'm just so proud to be there. So that kind of brings me up to date. And now I have these kids who are like nearly teenage or already teenage, and I'm going gray, and it's all happening. But I still have that kind of curiosity to keep learning and helping people.
Fantastic. What an impressive background and career journey that you've been on. Obviously, you've worked with some pretty well-known branded organisations, been involved in some instrumental transformation change programs, which is amazing. It'll be good to know a little bit more further down the line around some of the challenges and experiences that you had along the way, because I'm sure, as we said earlier, that it probably wasn't all rosy. But before we go into that, it'd be great to talk a little bit about and tell our listeners more about you as a leader. You started your career in consultancy, you've worked your way up through the ranks. Should imagine you've managed some fairly hefty, sizable teams along the way. So it'd be great if you could tell us more about your leadership style, and what do you think makes you a good leader that others could learn from?
Right. So my leadership style is probably my personal style. I'm not sure there's too much difference between how a person just genuinely is and how they lead organizations. It's sort of one extends into the other. I think if you asked people around to describe how I lead, it is about sort of positive drive, very people oriented, and in engineering worlds, sometimes that's not the first thing that people think of, but it is certainly the first thing that I think of. So quite people oriented, very much a sort of supportive, empathetic, listening, encouraging, supporter of my teams, and particularly my peers and those around me. But that's not to say I am soft necessarily, but I do think a blended set of skills around a table is really essential for a leadership team to function effectively. And often I find myself playing a role of incisive questioner. Can we check this? Can we simplify that? Can we make sure we are listening to our customers, make sure we're listening to our sort of colleagues and stakeholders? So perhaps I'm not a driver's driver per se, but I am definitely a people-oriented and attuned and logical sort of leader from the front. So I think that's probably how I describe myself. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's all about the people, isn't it? If we don't look after our people and put the people first, then, you know, what do we have left?
Yeah, I mean, our work, and certainly my work leading a sort of big systems engineering function now and in previous roles, there's so much invaluable expertise that comes from being technicians and really valuing the thought processes and individualities of people's sort of coding and testing and data and analytics talents, etc. But in the end, the success of a business and of a collective team is about how people work together and understanding almost the emotion behind the motivation that gets people out of bed and really wanting to do a great job. Right. Yeah.
I think you mentioned something earlier that I'd love to kind of dig a little deeper into, is around how at TalkTalk diversity piece and the culture, you think it's got that they've got that really right. So I'd love to know more from your perspective, why you think that is, and what you can do as a business and as a leader to help improve that, because that's something we get a lot of listeners email about it, because we're really passionate about diversity and inclusion at Transition Partners. And a lot of people want to know at the top level what they can do to help on that piece. And I think particularly saying, as you've done, hitting the mark at TalkTalk as a company, what they're doing right and what others can take away from that, your top tip for that would be fantastic.
So one of the reasons I was so attracted to work at TalkTalk probably boiled down to two things. First was the pace at which evidently TalkTalk can make decisions. And that's not a diversity point. That's just a crisp and entrepreneurial business point. But the second thing that really has me, and this is something I go back to time and time again, wherever I am, is, and this isn't cheesy, the values of a company genuinely matter, right? So when I talk to TalkTalk, the values there about sort of, customer centricity and entrepreneurialism, et cetera, is sort of what you might expect from many businesses in this sector and are core to success. However, there's a value in that is taken really seriously in sort of TalkTalk's pantheon called "You can be yourself here." Yeah, and I love that because it is so welcoming and inclusive, and people genuinely live by it. Yeah. So that value of "you can be yourself" here underpins, a real culture of respect, a culture of empowerment and searching for those opportunities to be ever more inclusive, right? And it also underpins what is a very flexible working culture. So, TalkTalk didn't have any difficulty flipping when we were all in lockdown, because we are equipped to do that, and people are trusted to be wherever they need to be for their own circumstance and work however they need to work. I think the results of that are a very cohesive senior leadership team, which is part of what I am. And gender-wise, we are, I think, magnificent. A female chief executive officer, female CFO, the sort of managing director of our consumer business, P&L holder, is also a very inspiring woman. We have lots of diversity also at the next level down, which is where I operate. I took a screen grab actually of a recent senior leadership team meeting, sort of one of those Microsoft Teams, sort of Zoom screenshots of the SLT, and it was just so satisfying to see so many sort of women and also sort of an ethnic diversity around that leadership table. And it does, it's not explicit, but it does, I think, provide a really respectful and just a healthy environment, and it all roots back to those core values. And
I love that, and
couldn't overemphasize how important I think that is.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, isn't it? And I think, like you say, having those good core values. But the thing is, I think a lot of businesses, they have the values, people learn them when they come to an interview, and then they get the job and it all goes out the window. But being able to embed that into everyday culture is so important, and it sounds like you're doing that really well at TalkTalk. So that's really
Yeah, no, I agree. And as you know, I've worked in a lot of businesses, many of which are very value driven. I mean, Morrisons, the same, just terrific. But you know, I believe in these, and that's hand on heart. And it's true. If you know, don't just ask me, ask others if you come across them.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'd love to know, I guess this is personal and professional, a bit more about you and what makes you tick and what you're passionate about. So I noticed that you're a trustee at GreaterSport. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that as well, but other things that you're passionate about within the industry and personally as well.
So I think we've probably covered passionate about people, right? In terms of this question, and you know, passionate about people in a wider sense might take me on to kind of GreaterSport. So GreaterSport is just an amazing sort of charity / extra non-governmental organization. It's basically an amazing charity that serves the people of Greater Manchester, so the 10 boroughs, and has a brilliant mission to help all Greater Mancunians from whatever walks of life become more active. Yeah. And so being more active sort of physically helps, and this is not sportiness necessarily, but it is just becoming more active in order to help improve both physical and, importantly, mental well-being. So as an organization, GreaterSport is aiming for 2 million people moving, whether that's walking to work or, you know, sort of taking their wheelchair up and down their terrace or whatever, for 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week. And I've been a trustee there with really an incredible organization and an incredible set of peers on that board since mid-2018. And the reason I do that work and feel so passionately about it is because I care about this city, and I care about sort of people's well-being. The people that are hardest to reach in terms of getting moving are the people that are likely in the sort of most deprived demographics and with the sort of least sort of accessibility opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And GreaterSport's mission is really to sort of help reach and fund those areas that need it most. You know, it's not about getting more triathletes doing more triathlons in Altrincham, right? It's about just reaching the pockets that will benefit the most from a bit of moving around. And I can tell, I mean, we all know from the lockdown experience that when you're restricted in terms of what you can do, it can have a real correlation and very individual with mental well-being. And getting out for a walk of an evening in sort of mid-April at the height of lockdown, I'm sure was many people's sort of route through.
Such a luxury, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I know. That lunchtime walk for me to take my son out every day was just like, it was the thing that kept you going. Apart from the ample lots of wine. Fantastic. So I just love your passion and love what you're doing with GreaterSport. It's music to my ears. Is that I'm a big firm believer and very passionate about giving back to the community. What would be really, really useful, I think, for our listeners, because we have a lot of listeners that are looking to that listen to these podcasts with a view to help them develop their career and you know, get to the point where they're kind of either head of level, director or C-level within a business. And you know, it'd be great to hear from you what you think your kind of, I guess, top tips would be for the listeners. Maybe 1 or 2 like top tips that you think you know, can help them aspire and develop to get to that level. What should they be doing? What sort of things should they be you know, trying to do, and what could help them?
So I think almost back to that sort of, I think I mentioned earlier that you just have to recognize individuality, right? So everybody is absolutely different, and it is completely evident to me that leaders come in all shapes and sizes and styles, right? So I think one thing that I've certainly learned is comfort in my own skin, right? And to recognize that, it's almost counterproductive to bend yourself out of shape to try to become something that is what you perceive to be kind of characteristics to get on, and actually that you're going to be much more successful if you are authentically your best self. If that makes sense. So I mean, it's probably a cliche these days, authentic leadership, but certainly when I do a lot of mentoring, and a continued theme that comes up time and time again, and it's true for me as well as anyone else, is confidence. And you're much more likely, I think, to convey the best of yourself and do the best job if you are relaxed about it. And you can be relaxed about it by being true to yourself, and just understanding your strengths and being honest about those areas that you need more support in. So top tip, I think, is be yourself, because actually whoever you are, you're probably pretty awesome. And if you can find ways of making that shine, then people will recognize that. There's an awful lot of nonverbal signaling that comes from feeling comfortable in your own skin and feeling comfortable expressing your opinions.
Fantastic. And you said that you so did you say that you provide mentoring as well, that you mentor?
Yeah, I love it.
Is that internal or external, or both?
It's a bit of all those things. So I think I probably started mentoring people back in Morrisons days. Yeah, definitely back in Morrisons days. And I think mainly internal at that point. But I think since I've become, I suppose, just more heavily networked, as it were, people ring me up and ask, right?
So people approach you and you just, yeah.
And, I've also done some kind of programmatic mentoring through, for example, the 30% Club this year, which is a sort of nationwide organization for women. So I tend to, at any one time, have a sort of a blend of internal and external mentees. And again, I am always learning from them. So one of the things I tell often the people that I work with in a mentoring capacity is that you guys should do this, because you learn so much about yourself by helping others, that it and that kind of reverse mentoring concept, where you learn as much about the perspective of others, whether they're more junior or they're in different spaces in their lives or in different sectors and industries. All of that is very much part of a two-way process of mentoring that I get great joy and learning from, and and great pride, actually, because when people I've had a sort of deep connection with through a mentoring relationship, find their next thing, or ring me up because they're super proud, because ring me up because it's happened like a couple of days ago, ring me up because they're in the middle of a total crisis and they need a bit of help. That's just really, that's really happy. I love that.
Brilliant. So you're a trustee, you're Director of Business Systems at TalkTalk. You are a mentor of not sure how many people. It sounds like you've got an awful lot on, plus you've got two kids. How do you manage to stay sane? How do you manage all the stress and all the kind of...
Well, I mean, various techniques that I've learned over the years. Again, probably back to that same answer of knowing yourself, right? So some things, sanity-wise, I'm just really, really fortunate to have in my life, right? So I have just a sort of rock solid and very brilliant and loving and helpful husband, and my kids are reasonably self-disciplined and independent, and like just a proper joy. And I certainly found over the last few years, they're both girls, they're 12 and 15, that they're starting to appreciate what I do professionally, and the fact that I'm likely to be a happier and better balanced mom as a result of having a fulfilling outside kind of career your life. So all of those support mechanisms, I think, are quite fundamental. And I think if I didn't have those in place, I would probably feel much more anxious, and I would probably be drowning as well. But I think the other, I'm by nature quite a positive and energetic person, which also probably helps. But I've also learned, and this is much more recent, to just forgive myself if I feel stressed, right? So, when I don't know if this happens to you guys, but oftentimes I will wake up and it'll be 3 a.m. and I will be like, oh, can't believe I'm awake. I'm clearly thinking you're dreaming about something. And I've just learned to just go, well, Jen, your subconscious clearly needs to work something through, flip on the light, do a crossword puzzle, read a novel, something like that, and let it work itself out. And then go back to sleep. Because if
you go back to sleep.
But if you sit there and stress about being stressed, then geez, that's worse, right? So
yeah, indeed.
And I think that forgiveness, that acknowledgement that, my brain just has to work stuff through. Also, the other thing I would say is I've just come to the realization that I am never going to get everything right. So the old kind of 80-90% rule, as it were, of let some stuff go. It's okay, is also right. Last thought, friends, like talk partners, people that you can just have a chat with. They're great. Yeah, highly recommend. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so important to have people to talk things through with, and to be able to talk, isn't it? It's particularly, obviously, it's National Suicide Awareness Day today, isn't it? Actually, we're recording this. 10th of September is the day we're recording today, and it's just so important that we talk about things and that you can share and speak to your community and your network and your little tribe of people. But I think there's definitely some really great things that you mentioned there about being able to forgive yourself. That's really like you say, you can't get everything right. And as leaders, and we're responsible for our teams, we take everything on our shoulders. Well, I think people do anyway, right? In life, we take everything so personally. We carry everything. We carry the weight of it all on our shoulders. And it's so important. You're not going to get it all right. Not everyone's going to get it right. So being able to allow yourself that space is really important. So that's really great and a great tip. So love that. Sandra runs a session called Taking Time in Tech, which is about mental health, mindfulness in the tech community. It's really great. And one of the tips that they mentioned was like, will you be worrying about it in 30 days? And I started doing that about everything now, and that's really helped me. So in 30 days time, am I going to be caring about this? And no, like most of the time, you get that feeling, don't you, that anxious feeling. And like pretty much everything I've done it since that workshop, Sandra, I've done it so many times on various things, and like everything I'm like, no, that's going to be forgotten about by then. So it's a really useful tool.
Great tip.
So amazing to hear your story and your journey. But I'd love to finish the podcast today with finding out a little bit more about what you're excited about. So what's on the agenda for Jen? What have you got going on that you're super excited about? It's been a funny year for a lot of us. 2020, we haven't been able to do half the plans we were meant to, but what's on the cards for the next couple of months, the next year or so that's getting you really excited at the moment?
God, well, I like I said before, just love my job at TalkTalk, and the sort of opportunity that we have in the telecom space with our to sort of truly execute on our fiber to the premise strategy is super complicated and crazy hard and sort of insane when you're in the trenches on it, but succeeding at that and sort of helping reform how we do things at TalkTalk, which is a perpetual and sort of iterative cycle, is high on my agenda at the moment. And, plenty of opportunity, plenty of challenge. So professionally speaking, very committed and excited about both the sort of market and technology opportunities that are ahead of us in the sort of TalkTalk roadmap. Kind of more personally, if I look ahead for the next number of months, it's an odd time still, I guess, with, like the thing I would be so most excited about if it was going to happen would be going to see my family on the West Coast. Right. But that may be a ways off. So I think you know, just maintaining a healthy and, as you said, sane kind of balance through the next number of months, year, really continuing to support and love my kids and family, and contribute to the community in a wider sense, and of course get great job satisfaction and continue to support some amazing teams at TalkTalk. All of those things are, yeah, a full plate and
Awesome. It sounds like you've got some good challenges ahead, but you sound like you're exactly where you need to be. Like, you obviously, clearly, you love your job, you love the culture, you love the organization, and yeah, it's going to be a challenging road ahead. You've got some big things on the agenda, but you sound like you're exactly where you need to be. So that's so awesome. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast, Jen. If anyone's got any questions or they want to reach out to speak to you personally, is it best to get in touch via LinkedIn, Twitter? What's the best form of contact for you?
Yeah, so probably LinkedIn is the easiest. It's where I am probably most social networky active, if that makes sense. You know, I have an account on Twitter and occasionally look at it, but no, get me on LinkedIn, and super happy to talk to anyone who wants to reach out. Yeah.
Amazing. And if anyone's interested in getting involved in the charity as well, is that something that, if they're Manchester based, is that something they can reach out to you about as well? Because it sounds like something I'd like to learn more about.
Reach out, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks for coming on the show, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra, so much. It was really fun talking to you guys. And
you too. It was so interesting. And you just, I'm in awe. You're so passionate and enthusiastic and positive. It's been great.
Oh, well, a real pleasure. And thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.